Mike, I'm sorry. There is no pre-canned applause for this show. It didn't. Randy and I talked about it. We don't have it in the budget to have a live audience in the room or this canned applause stuff. Randy wants canned humor, and he needs it.
A laugh track. We need a laugh track, Teddy. We need that. Yeah. Hey, by the way, we're letting people into the room right now. We've got 9 total. So the 3 of us.
And Randy, actually, that's 9,000.
Just remember, Teddy's our marketing VP. And if we see that we have 10 people, it's 10,000 people. So it's frequent that we'll get 20,000, 50,000 people all crammed onto this one little call here today. Yeah. So, hey folks, where are you watching us from? Chan is in Greensboro. So let's see where everybody else is.
And also when you show up here, let us know if you're new. We need to know if you're new folks. So who's just discovering us? So this is Lunch Conversations with Randy and Teddy. For those who don't know, I'm Teddy, and the other dude here with the shiny head is Randy. Our special guests today are 2 fabulous people from the Winston-Salem area, Roberta Latham and Mike Wells. You know, when you show up here at 11:55, you can ask us any question you want, and Randy and I promise to answer it.
We do, huh? Okay.
We do, buddy.
So, Mike, when is your next column coming? What do you write once a month for the Journal, or what is that now? Where are you at on that thing?
I do, and thanks for mentioning that. I've written it for many, many years now. And so, in fact, the next column will be the first Sunday of September. And as it turned out, and this was kind of in the queue some time ago, is unemployment law. And you should know that my primary source for all of the wonderful information I'm going to impart came from Roberta. But it'll be a pretty good mixture of, kind of common sense issues and what we both do on either side of the aisle, so to speak, in terms of, are you an employer? Are you an employee? You're trying to do the right thing. Mm-hmm. You're trying to get all the facts right. And in the process, of course, you're on the hunt for finding a good employee who will serve the company or the organization well. So I think it'll be helpful. This column that's coming up will be on kind of the do's and don'ts of the interview process, much of what we're going to be talking about here today. What can you ask? What can you not ask?
Yeah.
What kind of things maybe you should ask. And then the next column in October, the first Sunday in October, will be about practical things that employers can do in terms of employee manuals about, kind of standard office procedure, what to do if there are issues, how do you record that, overtime, things like that. What do you do to follow all the rules? Most companies, as I know Roberta would confirm, are trying to do the right thing. They're trying to get it right, but sometimes they've got bad information, or they've got information based on the way they did it where they work someplace else. Mm-hmm. So just want to make sure to impart as much information to help all parties, the prospective employee, the new employee, the seasoned employee, but also the employer, about what are the best things one can do to make sure that you get a good result on a day-to-day basis.
Sounds good. Well, Teddy, look at the clock on the wall.
Yeah. And my camera's spazzing out, but it's live and it's high noon, and we're going to go live on LinkedIn and Facebook. And so glad everybody's on here. Roberta, did you get a decent night's sleep last night?
I sure did. Thank you.
Good, because we want you to come here, and I knew you were, full of energy and ready to tackle all the stuff that we're going to talk about. So it'll be a lot of fun. So, hey, everybody, welcome to Lunch Conversations with Randy and Teddy. I'm Randy. This is my buddy, Teddy. Our special guest we'll tell you more about in a few minutes are Roberta Latham and Mike Wells. And for those who've never attended the show, I'd love to know, is this your first time here? So those of you who are live, let us know, is this your first time here, and how did you discover us? For those who don't know me, I'm a LinkedIn strategist. I work for a company called Burriss Consulting. That would be my wife. And I love teaching people how to use LinkedIn as a business tool. But more importantly, I love showing up every week and doing these shows with Randy. Hey, Randy, I know there's at least one person on here who doesn't know you. Would you introduce yourself to our friends?
Shame on them. Shame on them. Randy Wooden with Goodwill Industries of Northwest North Carolina. We're based in Winston-Salem. I run our professional center. So if you know somebody who maybe, I don't know, could be a college degree, maybe in leadership role, salaried position, that kind of stuff. If they're in a job search or it's you in a job search, reach out to me. Our services are free. We do work by appointment and we're happy to help. I have clients all across the country. And I will tell you, today is a kind of a special show for me because I'm no attorney and I don't play one on TV, but I get asked questions like, ageism. I get asked, can they ask me that question? And I hate putting my dates of education on the application, especially date of high school and all of those things. And I say, look, I'm no attorney. If it gets serious, you better bring one in. So guess what? We have two attorneys today, Teddy. So we're going to get some answers to some questions that I think a lot of folks have maybe wondered about at some point. So let me introduce our two guests and then we'll get the party started. Unless Teddy, you've got something else.
Before you introduce your guest, man, let me make sure that our audience of 20,000 people understand how to play this game. And that is, if you have questions you want to ask of our special guest or of Randy, use the chat box, ask me questions. I'm getting lazy like Randy, so I don't monitor the Q&A.
No.
If you have a thought or an idea, drop it in chat and we'll stick it in there where we need to. Hey, I only know Chan had sausage, egg, and cheese croissant for lunch. What else did you guys have for lunch? Drop that in chat. Randy, back to you, buddy.
Mike Wells Sr., longtime attorney in the Triad. Writing columns in the paper for many years and do a lot in the community, very high profile volunteer work that you've done over the years. Mike, I personally respect you and have followed you for many years. So I'm glad you can join us. Mike Wells on my right, I guess, as I look, is that fair? I don't know how, I never know how the Zoom thing works where all the Brady Bunch stuff plays out. And also Roberta King Latham joins us. And Roberta is also an attorney, and Roberta focuses on employment law. And as you know, if you've watched our show at all, we try to tie in topics for job hunters, but also for professionals in general. And so whether you're a job hunter today or maybe in the future, I think you'll have some good information shared today that might be relevant for you. So first off, let's just, if I could just have both of you just briefly explain where you work, that kind of a thing, and also the why behind what you do. Mike, let's start with you. The why behind what you do and the name of your law firm.
Thanks for providing this venue for folks. I think having done literally hundreds of talks and seminars in various groups over the years, it's a friendly venue where folks can feel free to ask questions, not feel intimidated by whoever the speakers are. We're all trying to get to the right place. So I started out, I don't have any lawyers in my family, but my father believed in lawyers, thought lawyers could be good advocates and do the right thing in terms of hard decisions, important decisions, and do a lot of good in the community because of their standing. And so that they could have an impact, broad impact, a lot on nonprofit circumstances. So I didn't think much about being a lawyer until I was in college at the University of Virginia many years ago. And one of my professors had taught at Princeton for many years. And he had dealt with some of the large issues about the court back in the Depression and so forth. And was just talked about some lawyers who I found very inspiring. And I thought, as I go about my choice of life's work, I want to be on a small scale, something of the character of these lawyers that he spoke about that had done so many good things, so that I could maybe have the opportunity in my own small way to contribute. So that's how I became a lawyer. No lawyers in my family, but a father who told me at a critical time in my law school career that if I was going to be a lawyer, here are some lawyers of good character that he thought I should try to emulate. So that's how I came to the practice of law, and then came to law school at Wake Forest. And so that's how I got to this law firm, or my firm, Wells Law. We have three lawyers involved, and so I've been a lawyer for a long time in our community.
Good deal.
And
Roberta,
you do have, and you do have at least one other lawyer in your family now.
Right. Actually, I have two. I have one of our sons is practices with me, Michael, and then our youngest child, Christopher, is an associate attorney general. I think I've got that spot right, and for the state of Illinois in Chicago. And he had the good sense to marry a lawyer who he met in law school, who's from Chicago. So he's a lawyer in Chicago. Michael lives in Greensboro, but practices here. So we've got two lawyers among three. So I guess might be over lawyered, some may say.
let's move to Roberta. Roberta, you're also an attorney. So are you solo practice, or how does that all shape up? And then what's your why? What got you pointed in the career direction that you're in now?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me start with the why, if I may.
Yeah.
My father was a small town attorney, and I really respected what I saw him do. And this is a small town in Lewisburg, West Virginia. And a lot of times he wasn't making much money, but I saw that he was really helping the folks around him and the folks in the community. And so that was my why. I looked at my father and I wanted to live that type of life. So I moved from Lewisburg, West Virginia to Winston-Salem. I went to Wake Forest as well, both law school and in undergrad, and then started with a medium-sized law firm here in Winston-Salem, in which I was a partner and practiced for 17 years. And a couple of years ago, I decided, you know what, there are a lot more ways that I can be helping people if I have the opportunity to really be able to share my focus and to share my vision. And so I opened up my own law firm, which is King Latham Law. And I did that about 2 years ago. And as you said, I practice in the areas of employment law, personal injury law, workers' compensation, business law. And I've had the highest privilege and pleasure now to form a relationship with Wells Law, where I also serve as the counsel with his law firm. And it's just really been an honor. And I've just so enjoyed working with Mike in his firm.
Well,
Very cool.
Not go on too much about Roberta, but she's somebody with whom we've worked for a long, long time. She's an excellent lawyer, is well regarded, has been a leader in North Carolina Bar Association and so many important nonprofit tasks. And as I say, is highly regarded for her knowledge. I started my own law firm many years ago. I sort of felt like Roberta, well, hey, I think I can maybe try this out on my own. So it takes a little bit of strength to strike out on your own. But anyway, it's been a good thing. And so when Roberta went out on her own, we had associated her on some cases where we needed her level of expertise, which worked out very well. And so when she started her own firm, and particularly in her lanes of work as an employment law attorney and as an experienced trial lawyer, it just seemed like a good thing to do to get have her work in meaningful ways to us. And so it's been a good relationship for a long time. I'm from West Virginia too, so if you get West Virginians, it's pretty good in North Carolina.
Hey, I know Teddy's got a question you want to throw in there, right, Teddy?
I'm going to bring up a question when you're ready, Randy. But
not yet.
Roberta, I took a look, and your dad hopefully was a single lawyer in a town of 3,886 people.
That's correct. That's correct. And oftentimes there wasn't actual pay. Sometimes there was trading. For example, I remember one time somebody needed my father to handle a criminal matter. My father needed his car painted, so they did a little bit of trading on that.
Yeah. Hey, just as a little quick teaser here are some of the talking points that these folks submitted. So we're going to try to tackle some of these topics, but also your questions. And yes, we are prepared to go there in terms of COVID and what is the latest and greatest from what is the state saying? And that's where Roberta is going to swing that hammer and really let folks know this is where things are today. But some of the topics, what does it mean to be an at-will state? North Carolina is an at-will state. How does that all unfold if I'm an employee that gets let go, or I'm an employer, whatever? What are the lanes here that we need to stay in? Also, we talked about COVID and related employment law issues around vaccines, masks, mandates, you name it, all that. That is a fluid situation for sure. And so we'll get the latest on that. Also, important federal and state laws that are out there. Unemployment benefits, some of that ends in September. And so what does that look like for you if you're an employee or a potential employee? We'll find out about that. Also, just some general do's and don'ts of employment law. I'm going to ask also about any kind of, it's one thing to talk about, well, they discriminated against me based on race or based on age or based on whatever protected class I might fall within. And that's all well and good. So if I sue them, what's that going to cost me? And what am I going to gain from that? Is it really worth it? And it may not be. So we'll get a perspective from an attorney. Also, I'll ask you to dust off the crystal ball to the degree that you're comfortable to see what's coming down the pike in terms of regulations and laws. What do you see as Congress working on and at the state level, if there's anything you can shed some light on? So those are some topics. Teddy's got the chat thing all pinned down. And Teddy, I'll throw it to you for the first question. It looks like we have
if you
one.
want to take that question, Randy, it's in the list.
The COVID.
Take it now.
Let's do the COVID one, yeah, because that's on everybody's mind. Yeah.
Yep. So, what's the law? The question was poised. What's your view? But I know lawyers often state fact and not so much opinion. But what's your view, or what's the law say about employers mandating vaccines for their employees? Roberta, Mike?
I'll be glad to start on that. So both the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the EEOC, and the Department of Justice have weighed in on that issue. And both of them have indicated that, generally speaking, employers may mandate vaccines.
Okay.
And they may also mandate masks. Now, there are exceptions to that. So, for example, if somebody has a disability or has an underlying health condition, that person can seek an accommodation whereby they may not have to get the vaccine or may not have to wear a mask. Or if someone has a strongly held religious view, then that person may also seek an accommodation where they may not have to receive the vaccine or wear a mask. But as it stands right now, there have been challenges to those laws, and they have just not been successful.
What about with regard to HIPAA? And, it's none of your dang business whether I got a shot or, whatever. So is that not in play anymore? I mean, can an employer ask me to show them my papers?
Well, technically speaking, HIPAA does not apply to employers from a technical standpoint. But yes, an employer may ask you to show the employer your COVID papers. And I think that what there's been a weighing of is the needs of society and the dangers of this terrible pandemic. And so that's why the Department of Justice has come out and the EEOC and said, vaccines can be mandated, provided that there is a legitimate business reason. Now, this is for employees who are actually coming into a building. If you have an employee who's working remotely, of course, an employer couldn't, mandate that they wear a mask at home or have a vaccine. But otherwise, the employer can.
Yeah.
And maybe
Mike, side of it, I can tell you, any number of employees will come in and they will not have been vaccinated, or they don't believe in vaccination, or present employees that you have. And so to Roberta's main point is this is it's about the employee, but it's about others. I mean, we're all in this together. And so when someone has not had the vaccine or does not wear a mask or any of these actions that one can take to avoid the spread of the virus, it has a direct impact on those who come in the office, service providers, clients. And so the object is, it's not only to assist others in the office from getting something from someone who may not have the vaccine, but it's all the people around us. So it's important to do that for our own clients, to provide them sort of the good housekeeping seal of approval that we're about their health as well.
Yeah, and I would wonder too, if I'm an employer and I don't mandate vaccines and some of my folks get sick, am I maintaining a healthy workplace? And I don't know that OSHA is necessarily the answer on this thing, but does that help leave me exposed legally if I'm an employer when some folks get sick, if I haven't mandated it? Maybe is that part of the driver in the justification for mandating vaccines?
Potentially.
Mhm.
There really haven't been any successful lawsuits whereby there's been a lawsuit by an employee against an employer who says, well, employer, you didn't mandate the vaccine and I got sick. And I think that's because COVID is so hard to trace. I think it would be extremely hard to show that it was picked up at a workplace. But back to Mike's fundamental point, though, an employer has a responsibility to make sure that an employee is safe and provide them with a safe workspace. And so, aside from the liability issues, I think it comes down to just plain old good and fashioned taking care of folks.
Yeah. Anything else on the COVID topic that you're seeing maybe that's coming down the pike legislatively at the state level or perhaps even at the national level? Anything that you can kind of clue us in on here in advance? Anything that you're seeing out there?
Haven't seen anything yet.
Okay.
Let me add on to that. As many of our listeners may know, I get questions from time to time from Ask Sam, the straight answer, ma'am, in this case, M-A-A-M. And I got an inquiry just a couple of days ago about someone had written into Sam and said, well, how does anybody make us wear a mask? About how can the government, how can the governor or the mayor, as we all know, should know, that the mayor came out with a requirement that said it's a matter of basically due to the emergency circumstances that people have to wear masks. I mean, it's a statewide, it's a citywide mandate. And so, yes, what's probably coming down the road is, and of course, the city has mandated that. I don't think, Roberta, has the governor mandated that yet?
I don't think so.
I don't think so. Of course, hot wicket, of course, in terms of the political issues of it. So I'm sure all elected officials are careful about that. But the virus issue is so, we just don't know. We don't know what may happen with this variant. So I think you'll see other certain governmental bodies. The law is clear for the city of Winston-Salem, any city in North Carolina for sure, any county body, if there is a stated emergency circumstance, and the governor too can order emergency actions that protect the body politic. So those laws are in place now. Whether or not the facts warrant some action by a governmental body and sort of the politics of it too are different things. But the law is clear there. If we have an emergency in our community, the chief head of state, so to speak, elected official, has the right to take emergency powers, if you will, to protect the public.
Sure. Teddy, I see some questions in the chat area. I think we can move on from COVID.
Yeah, let's move to another topic. Let's move. So Don asked this question about in job search, he was contacted by a potential employer. While on the phone, he said, hey, let's get together. And I don't know if he used these words or not, but Don Leasy believes that the guy used these words so I can find out how old you are and get to know more about you. And Don said he was stunned that he was blatantly asked to find out how old he is. And by the way, I know Don. I mean, let me tell you, I know Don. But anyway, Don says, when do you let it ride? Or when do you challenge / take legal action?
Do you want to take the lead on that one?
Sure. I think that is clearly an illegal question to be asked. Generally, there's clear rules on this, irrespective of whether you're an employee at will state, as North Carolina is. You just can't ask about things about, age, sexual orientation, national origin, all of those sorts of things. You just can't ask those kinds of questions. Now, what the remedies may be for an employee who, a prospective employee may be, I guess you'd have to establish damages, Roberta. If somebody says you shouldn't have asked me that question and I'm all shaken up about this, I don't know what your damages would be. But one of the things that any employment lawyer would tell you is, don't ask those kinds of questions. And before you get into an interview with a prospective employee, be sure you understand not only what you should ask from the management side, but what you cannot ask under the law. So questions about age would be one that you should not ask.
Yeah, and so, and I get it that companies of any size are going to be in tune. Theoretically, let's go with me on this for a minute. But if a company of any size, they've got some savvy HR folks, attorneys that advise them. So they have a litany of questions to ask, and they ask the same questions of each candidate. And so they go by the book to cover their butt. And I get that. Where it goes off the rails is when you get an entrepreneur, you get a small company who doesn't have, they may just be ignorant. They may not know what the law allows and doesn't allow. So for those smaller employers, the entrepreneurs out there, the small companies that may not have an HR staff, is there a resource that they can reach out to get the parameters so they understand and can remain in compliance? The resource out there for them, small companies?
The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, or EEOC, has a vast amount of information available for employers of all sizes, which provides information about what type of questions can be asked, what type of questions can't be asked, and also has some resources just in general about how to treat your employees and what you can and what you can't do. So the EEOC, I would refer them there.
And that's a free resource, I guess, right? Is that free to
read? Is.
Yeah.
In fact, it is EEOC.gov, I believe.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So yeah.
Let's go back, if you don't mind. Give us just a high level thought of the remedy. I'm the 63-year-old dude, and I'm sitting in Randy's office, and Randy goes, I don't want to hire a bunch of old people. How old are you? And I'm like, I don't want to answer that question. Is there a logical remedy at that moment? Or as Don was asking, should we just accept the fact, and Randy, I'm playing with you, that Randy's just ignorant and don't know what question to ask, and I just got to let it go? Thoughts?
So what would one do, Roberta, if you were a prospective employee and somebody asked you a question that the employee knows is clearly, and in fact is, you can't ask that question? I guess they could report them. Could you report that?
You could. The EEOC, again, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, is the body that oversees the federal laws when it comes to age discrimination or discrimination based upon race or sex. I do want to throw this caveat out there, though. Mm-hmm. Those laws typically only apply to employers by their terms who have more than 15 employees.
Oh, okay. So
if there's a small employer out there who asks an inappropriate question about sex, about age, then there's not an institution, there's not a body, there's not an administrative agency to which they can go to report those, unfortunately. But if there is that type of inappropriate question asked, or if someone is treated inappropriately at work based upon those protected categories, and the employer has more than 15 employees, then that employee can go to the EEOC. There's an EEOC public portal.
I got it.
The employee goes to the EEOC public portal to start an inquiry, which will then start the process toward filing a complaint with the EEOC, which then starts the investigative process.
All right. So I wonder this, and I don't know the answer. So that's why I'm glad I have two attorneys here. Teddy, I get answers to questions that keep me up at night. Now, so does this apply? If I felt like I got, because, Teddy's much older than I am. I mean, come on. Actually, no, we're this close age-wise. So I feel your pain, Teddy, and I'm sure that, I feel like ageism is real. And just like a lot of isms and biases, they're out there. So let's assume that we have a larger company we're dealing with here. So does this whole discrimination cover both the interview process for a new hire as well as an internal promotion? I'm already in the company. Is it treated the same, or are those two employment status levels different in some way?
The employment status levels aren't different. So the laws apply to both the hiring process, the interviewing process, the onboarding process, and during the course of the employment. And what the issue is, once someone is employed, well, wait a second, were they passed up because of their age on a promotion, or were they passed up due to their gender or sexual orientation, or were they terminated based upon those protected categories? Or perhaps they were paid less because they were a woman, or because of their age or their race, or one of those other protected categories. So the standard remains the same, but to Mike's point, the damages do change. And in a lawsuit, what one is looking for are damages, and so that's essentially what a litigant is looking for when they go to court. And so at the beginning of the hiring process, obviously the damages wouldn't be as great as they would for someone who was with a company for 20 years, and then that person was terminated, and then someone younger brought in to replace them. So it's very different in terms of damages. The standard's not different, but the damages piece is different.
Hey, Teddy, it's almost half past. You want to take care of business, and then we'll dive into some more stuff?
I'm going to respond to Roberta's statement. So, Roberta, you're telling me when my car gets old, I can trade in on a new model, but I can't do that with my employees unless I do it the right way.
That's exactly right. And you can't do it for that reason. That's exactly right.
You might be an employment lawyer in your next career.
Yeah, I'm going to be careful with that, Mike, I'm telling you. Hey, this is welcome everybody. This is Wednesday, August 25th. You're on Lunch Conversations with Randy and Teddy. Our special guests today are Roberta Latham and Mike Wells. The conversations about employment law and how it affects you in your career journey, during interviews and job search. And the first segment's been really informative. And so drop your questions here and I'll queue them up as best I can. Randy, back to you, buddy.
Yeah, and again, said lively debate here, lively questions. So let's tackle this. What's a definition? You talk about an at-will state. North Carolina is an at-will state. What does that mean? What's the practical application of it?
Well, I'll let Roberta jump in on that.
All right.
I'd be glad to. So an at-will employment means that either the employer or employee can terminate the employment relationship for any reason whatsoever. It could be the employer doesn't like the employee's pink hair. The employer doesn't like the pink shirt. It could be for their green shirt, or for any of those reasons, unless there is an employment contract and an employer cannot terminate or take an adverse employment action against an employee for any illegal reason. So let's start with the employment contract. Oftentimes there are contracts that employees and employers enter into, and that contract is going to govern the terms of the employment. But still, that employment relationship is still subject to the state and federal rules. So what are these state and federal rules? What are the illegal things that employers cannot do? So I'm going to mention a few of those rules. So number one, you've got Title VII of the Civil Acts Right of 1964. And that makes it illegal for an employer to discriminate or take an adverse employment action against someone based upon their race, their sex, their age, their national origin, for example. You also have that, we've talked about this already, you've got the Age Discrimination Act, and that protects employees who are 40 years and over. And it doesn't say, well, you can't just terminate somebody, or you can't not just terminate somebody when they reach 60 or they reach 65, but you can't just do it because of that. And then we have the Americans with Disabilities Act, and that protects folks who have disabilities, which are which disability is something that affects an everyday life function to a substantial degree. And what that law says is that an employer cannot discriminate against somebody because of a disability. What the law also says is that if a person needs an accommodation, so let's say, for example, I suffer from chronic back pain and I am somebody who works at a desk. I need to stand up every hour to be able to stretch my legs. What the law says is that if I have a doctor who says that that's what I need, that the employer needs to accommodate that and make an accommodation. And also we have laws that protect folks based upon some other categories as well. There are laws that protect women who are pregnant. There are also some North Carolina laws. There's also public policy, which means that if somebody reports an illegal activity, the employer can't just terminate them. And there's a whistleblower action. So if an employee sees some safety violation in a plant, for example, and they go and they report it to OSHA, terminating the employee in that type of circumstance would be illegal, as you can imagine. It would also be illegal for an employee to terminate an employer to terminate an employee because they make a workers' compensation claim because they got injured at work. And so those are just some of the examples.
Now,
yeah. Go ahead, Mike.
A question about the numbers of people. So the numbers of employees, would those laws apply to a company that has less than 15 employees as well?
The federal laws and state laws that I spoke about apply to employees who have 15 or more, or employers who have 15 or more employees. Now, the North Carolina public policy and the whistleblower and the laws that protect folks who are injured in workers' compensation cases, those apply regardless of the number of employees.
So from looking at it from kind of both sides of the situation is, if I'm a prospective employee and I come to a company that has, as many businesses are, as we know, I mean, the vast majority of organizations, companies have less than 15 employees. And so somebody asked me an impertinent question relating, to any number of things. I would say, as a prospective employer, well, is this the kind of boss I want to have? Somebody that makes some, condescending comment or makes some comment that would suggest to you that he or she is not going to judge me on the merits versus some kind of theory he or she may have about age or sex or, any number of things. So that you just kind of have to make a judgment on that. Is that where I want to work, where I'm going to be judged by prejudice, bad viewpoint, whatever? So these laws are to augment certainly for larger companies, but for the smaller companies, you certainly would want to make sure somebody doesn't have some narrow view of life. And that's why the public policy of these things is so important. And speaking briefly to Roberta's comments about workers' compensation laws, this retribution if somebody files a claim, this was not always the case. It was probably in the last 20 years or so, maybe, that this law came into effect, that if I'm hurt on the job and I file a claim and say, well, I'm entitled to workers' compensation, which is going to have an impact on the company, a company should not be able to fire me because I filed a claim. And so that was kind of a crease in the law that there was some publicity about it. And finally, the legislature thankfully changed that. So irrespective of the number of employees a company may have, you can't take action against an employee and fire them because they filed a claim that may cause the company's unemployment compensation insurance premiums to go up.
Yeah. Betty,
Here's a question. Mike, your joke earlier about I might be a employment lawyer in my next career. reminds me that I often got into conversations with people about non-compete agreements. And one of my simple statements to people who would ask me about non-compete agreements is I would say, I think they don't hold the value unless they are compensated in some way. So that was my opinion. But then I would, Mike, I would also then say, but I recommend you talk to a lawyer about it to make sure you know what you got to deal with there. Now, so another gentleman by Mike, one of the people in our audience, one of Randy's and my stalkers. This guy's been stalking Randy and I for years. Good guy. He says, how do we handle a legal threat based on a non-compete agreement? Any thoughts or questions or perspectives on that?
Well, if I may start
Sure.
with just the basic law of non-compete in North Carolina. So non-competes are enforceable, but courts don't really like it when an employer tries to tell an employee that they can't go work somewhere else. They call it restraint on trade. So non-compete agreements have to be appropriate, and they have to comport with certain requirements. So they have to be reasonable as to time. They have to be reasonable as to territory, and they can't be against public policy. So I just wanted to kind of start with the overview of non-competes, and I'll let Mike take it.
And that makes a lot of sense. And let me give you some real life examples. So if you're a company, whatever your size, and you have never had a non-compete clause contract, you've never had a written contract, you just decide, well, hey, I don't want people leaving my business, so I'm going to require everybody to sign a non-compete. Well, you can't require an employee to sign that, if I'm correct on this, without additional compensation, because you've added a new level of to the deal. And so years ago, I had a client who was an employee, and the company talked to somebody and said, well, hey, you just need to get some non-compete clauses and have everybody sign them. Didn't pay them any extra money for this value. I'm limiting my options. And so we had to go to court, and the court ruled in our favor and said, well, you just can't slap this on to all the employees without paying them something for it. So that case was thrown out. Another variation of this is, and you see this a lot with maybe with larger employers, and they'll say, kind of like Roberta was talking about, well, you can't, I'm going to limit you to so much time where you can't compete. You can't compete with somebody within 50 miles because what you may learn may benefit this new employer. So what happens every now and then is that a company will say, well, you can't go to North Wilkesboro and be in business. Well, North Wilkesboro is not within this, distance range. What in the world is somebody doing something in High Point? How's that going to impact somebody in North Wilkesboro? So it's got to be reasonable. It's got to be reasonable. You can't say, well, I only have a place here in Winston-Salem, but you cannot compete anywhere in North Carolina or northeast or southeastern United States. Well, that would be, categorically unreasonable. Now, you don't see that much anymore because people are a little more wise on it. Every now and then you'll see a larger organization that tries to have these very broad edicts that limit somebody because they get mad at them, and then if they're not reasonable, then you got.
Mike, what about with remote working now? You've got people all across the country working remotely. Is the geographic restriction now somehow changed because you got them scattered like seeds in the wind all across the country?
I would ask Roberta that. So if I'm working from home in Winston-Salem, but my company is in, Richmond, Virginia, and somebody's offered me a job 20 miles outside of Richmond, but I'm working remotely, would that, if I have a non-compete that says I can't work within 50 miles of Richmond, would that still be enforceable?
I don't think it would.
Yeah.
So even if you're working remotely, basically you're working for a new company within the 50-mile radius, then you would be able to do that. So I'm saying, okay.
Got another follow-up too on that real quick, and that is this. All right, so fine. I've been working for your company for 20 years, and suddenly you get the bright idea to start up a non-compete, and you say, okay, Randy, I'll pay you $200. And I say, no. Can I turn it down and still stay there? Or is it accept our offer, an offer you can't refuse? Can I turn it down and stay at the company and say, no, that you can't change the rules in midstream? Now, granted, if I do that, they're going to look at me like an outcast and probably find a way to get rid of me at some point. And I get that. But do I have the ability and the right to be able to refuse whatever compensation they elect to throw my way?
Or negotiate it.
You can certainly negotiate anything. However, it goes back to employment at will.
Yeah.
So an employer can terminate the employment relationship for any reason whatsoever.
Yep.
And it's not illegal. So if an employer puts the non-compete in front of the employee and says, I don't think $200 would really get it, because it has to be
reasonable.
I'm cheap, but okay. But I get, okay. So point is, yeah, the at will thing supersedes all that, and I can yell and scream and kick and whatever, but at the end of the day, I don't have a right to that job.
So Randy, sign the agreement I sent you, and let's move on. Okay.
I'll tell you, I got to digress for it. I work for a real jerk in Ohio. And the guy's probably still alive. And I'm sure he's watching, because all the cool people watch our show, Teddy. So I was employed at the time. I interviewed, they hired me, and never was a word spoken about a non-compete. So in the meantime, I had quit my job and had a few days off, and then showed up for work the first day. And they said, oh, by the way, we have this 10-page non-compete that you need to sign before we'll start the training process. I was stuck. I couldn't go back to my old job. And this was a very, very, very restrictive non-compete. Onerous. Is that a good word, Teddy? Anyway, did they have a leg to stand on legally in that case by not divulging that there would be that condition of employment, meaning a non-compete? In your view, again, this is an Ohio situation.
I would think if it was not listed as one of the requirements, that they wouldn't be able to add it at that point. But maybe they would be able to say that. Now, that doesn't help you with the job you just left.
Yeah, I was stuck. I had to sign it. Sign the paper.
What prospective employers should say is, do you have any written contracts that have any of these provisions? Because I guess the employer could say, well, before you're hired, I'm adding this condition, and you may be a little late in the game, but you're not on board yet.
Yeah.
They could probably do that, but so you probably would want to ask about that as a prospective employee.
Yeah, live and learn, and I have lived and learned since then. So I do want to talk another topic here, and that is the unemployment benefits. And there's the politics involved, there's the finance involved. Anywhere you turn up and down the street, we're hiring. I can't find workers, whatever. So there's all that stuff going on. So help us understand what is what is this that's going away in September, and help us understand, are there laws surrounding that will somehow impact the employment situation? What's happening in September?
Well, I think the governmental payment for individuals who are out of work ends in September, and so the theory from some on politics side would say, well, we can't get workers because the federal government's paying folks, and we can't hire them because they're getting money from that. So I think that's what ends, and so the belief is, I guess, that, well, once folks aren't getting their governmental check, then they'll be available and they'll want to come work, and that's the reason, because the government's handing out money that they shouldn't be handing out. So that's, I guess, what ends in September is the governmental money.
You don't see that changing and being continued in any way, renewed or anything like that? Or do you see that dying on the vine right now?
Well, I think it probably is going to die on the vine right now, but that could change.
Yeah, I think, and this is just a political opinion, I think the economy has picked up. And so the idea is that we want to keep people working as long, we want to keep the economy juiced up. And so we're going to help people through as they say in the country, help through the fence in a delicate time. I think part of the challenge overall is that a lot of employees are saying, well, hey, I don't want to come back into that building. I'm working remote and I got another job I can get remotely so that I don't have to come in. And so the reason why folks can't get workers is more complex than, oh, they're getting a government check.
Yeah.
And that's not working so well.
Yeah, there's something we talk a lot at Goodwill called the benefits cliff, and people get benefits. Low income folks get benefits from the government, and it is a disincentive. Childcare is one, and transportation are some of the huge ones, some barriers to employment. And so if somebody does take a job at a higher pay rate or does take a job, then they lose some of the state and federal benefits. And so it becomes a barrier for a lot of folks. And again, Goodwill deals with this a lot. It's one of the biggest challenges that we engage with, and that is the benefits cliff. It's real, and HR people know it. And I don't know that I have an answer for it. But those are variables out there that we have to play with. Teddy, was there another question
Doug threw out a question that we may or may not be able to answer. He asked, can a company have a policy that when you hit 65, your health benefits end?
Like health insurance benefits, right? So you're old enough to get on there, right? That age. I don't know the answer to that. I wouldn't.
I don't know the answer to that either, but I have a suspicion that would probably be okay.
Yeah, if there's funding provided by a governmental, entity in which people have paid in, by the way, part of what, correct me if I'm wrong on this, Roberta, that if you're an employee, the employer pays part of the Social Security tax and the Medicare tax. So every employee has to pay their share, but the employer throws some money in the pot too. So that's why sometimes people want to say, oh, you're an independent contractor, you're going to have to pay all that stuff on your own. But if you're a true employer, then the employer's on the hook for more than just whatever the wage is. So money's been paid in by an employer and an employee for governmental benefit for which you're entitled under the law. I believe when you turn 65, you can get Medicare.
Sounds like a good research project. I just listed it to go ask my SHRM folks as well. And I know some SHRM people that might be able to help me with that. So
yeah, hey, we've got another almost 5 minutes or so. And so we're getting to the point where let me just take let me throw one other question unless Teddy's got one. And then we're going to ask you to kind of summarize with some takeaways you'd like folks to have. And that is, I guess, the crystal ball question. Teddy, get your crystal ball out, please.
Randy,
Teddy's prepared.
I've been using it all morning long, buddy. I've wore it down to a nub.
There it is, the crystal ball. Shake it up a little bit. Just see what's inside that
Randy,
thing.
it's not a globe, dude. It's a crystal ball. You don't shake it.
I thought it was like a snowman thing. So I used to love those as kids.
Lordy help me.
Sorry. Anyway, he has to put up with me all the time. So it's nothing new to him, but I apologize. So anyway, crystal ball time. You guys have been at this a while. You know your stuff, and you're also ear to the ground with politics as well. So you don't live in a cave, and so crystal ball wise, what do you see in terms of changes in the employer-employee relationship? Anything you want to throw out there? It's kind of an open-ended question. What's the crystal ball looking like for you guys?
Do you want to start?
Well, I would just say from a practical standpoint is that the level of experience and education that many have that have gotten this far may not get them to the next step. because we are increasingly, as we all know, going to much more technical jobs that require education, formal education, and also specific education. So back in the day of the good old days, some would say, and when Reynolds and Haynes were kind of coming along, and you could drop out of high school and have a sixth grade education if the law allowed you to at that age, to get a job at Reynolds and make a good living, or Haynes. So well, those days are over now. You're not going to be able to drop out of high school and get much of a job. And so that's why organizations like Forsyth Tech and others that can augment your formal education to where you get a specific skill set, whether it's being a plumber or whatever it may be, you're going to need to know more than, hey, I got a wrench and I can fix my sink. You're going to have more than that. So I would see that as the dynamic, and that's why there's so much of an emphasis by all levels of government, city, county, state, federal. You've got to have an education. You've got to get a skill set, or you're just not going to be ready for the new technology, which is driving so many kinds, irrespective of what you do. Things are going to require more technical skills, and people who have more technical skills than they've ever had.
That's something we talk about, being a lifelong learner and at Goodwill, and that what got us up to where we are today is not going to sustain us and remain competitive throughout the next umpteen years in our working life. So good info there. Any real quick, we've got just a couple of moments left. Roberta, anything on the crystal ball from your perspective?
Well, I think that to build upon what Mike said, I mean, I really think that it is an age of technology, and the crystal ball might already be here, because I think that working is so different now, and I think it's always going to be. Folks are used to working remotely. They like working remotely, and I think that is something that is going to be here to stay. And, quite frankly, I don't know that it's necessarily a bad thing. I think it's probably a good thing. It allows employers and employees flexibility. So I think that's part of something that I think will continue to change and has changed.
Great. Instead of the summary with the takeaways, because we've hit a lot of topics, I want to get Mike Wells on here, because Mike has written a lot of articles and columns over the years on what I learned on the way to the courthouse. And I think most of us have seen or read those at times over the years. So I asked Mike to tee one up ahead of time. I don't know what it's going to be, but what have you learned about life on your way to the courthouse, Mike?
Well, I don't know that I have any more wisdom other than what works and what doesn't work. I know a lot of things that don't work, but I think it is really important that people like what they do, and that they like the people with whom they're working. If you look at studies across the board, there seem to be a lot of people, more than one would think, who don't really like their jobs for whatever reason, or they have some mild or more discontent. So do something that you like, and get people, work with people who treat you with respect, no matter what you do. And so I think you'll see people switching around, but you really have to like what you're doing. And if you don't, I mean, there are going to be parts of any job that you like and don't like. But you've got to fundamentally like what you're doing, and you have to have a respect for your employer, and respect with the people with whom you work, that there aren't any kind of factors that aggravate you. So I think a lot of that is, just kind of common sense, but that seems to be a mild area of discontent across the country, that people don't seem to maybe care as much for their jobs. Back in the day, coming up, is you'd be grateful to have a job. But that seems to have changed more. And to this point about working remotely, that's why that may have an appeal to people, that they can kind of be on their own and not have to deal with all the day-to-day things. I think it's going to be kind of shifting a little bit from your good question, that you'll see a fundamental shift now that people know about how to do the Zoom contraptions and all of that, that you're going to have a lot of commercial space that big companies are going to be saying, why do we need to have this? I've got good employees who can work remotely, cut down on all this expensive office space, You're going to see a lot of those changes, but I would say just overall, I think people need to like what they do and find something that lights a fire under them during the day. And if they do that, you're a lucky person because not everybody has that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, Teddy.
Hey, John Hamilton, I shared his full name because he went out and did some research for us. He's our research assistant online. He said the law requires a large employer with at least 20 employees to offer you and your spouse the same benefit that it offers younger employees and their spouses. It's entirely your choice, not the employer's, whether to accept the employer health benefit and delay Medicare enrollment. So there's the answer to that question that Mike did found that information online. And we all know, we believe 100% we've read online. I'll ask Mike later where he found that. So
our crack research staff is hard at work there. Hey, folks, thanks again for joining us. Mike Wells Sr. there with the jacket, the suit and tie today. You know, not many, I tell you what, bankers and attorneys. Who else wears ties these days, Teddy? You don't wear a tie. When's the last time you wore a tie?
Lord, I've got a closet full of them, but I'm not worn one. But then again, I don't have to represent to the level that Roberta and Mike represent. So kudos to them.
And thanks to Roberta King Latham right there and talking about
Mike, what were you saying?
Yeah, I was going to say, you two need to take your show on the road. Okay.
Or just hit the road. Just hit the road. Mike, I appreciate your articles over the years. Really good stuff. Roberta, thanks for
coming up in September will be on employment law, and so many of them.
A lot of good relevant stuff. And that Mike, we ought to write a column together at some point. We ought to just sit down and figure out how can we, from the candidate side and the strategy, and from the employer side and the strategy, we ought to do something to reach out to Jennifer and the folks over there and see if we can do something together sometime.
Sure. Well, I would want to bring along my lawyer, Roberta, because she's the one.
Well, absolutely. We could just add another one to the mix. Again, thanks to both of you for coming along. Teddy, I've got a real quick story. I'll throw it to you, and then I'll wrap it up with our next week's guest. And my story is just kind of a quick one. I don't, again, as I said earlier, I don't profess to be an attorney, and you hear things and you think, oh, that sounds pretty smart. I better think about that and incorporate that into my shtick. But don't take legal or tax advice from me. Trust me, you don't want to do that. But I remember I had a candidate, or I had a client back in Ohio many years ago, and he worked for a soft drink company that isn't Pepsi, but is as popular as Pepsi. And he was terminated on the spot when two of his associates, who were slackers, this is his version, he was writing them up for lack of effort or whatever. And they said, if you write us up, we will report you for sexual harassment. And he wrote them up, and they did. And there he sits in tears in my office up in Ohio. And he said, I didn't do it. I had to go home and tell my wife I got fired after 25 years for harassment. But the key, and the reason I bring this up, and it speaks to your point earlier, is that they didn't give him a hearing. They just said, you're out, you're gone. And I always thought that was not fair to him. 25 years career down the drain because pissed off employees wanted to seek revenge, and they did. And they got this guy fired, and his life, he felt like, was over. And just an observation. So Teddy, I'll throw it to you, and then we'll talk next week's guest and skedaddle.
You know, I'm not an attorney. I don't want to be an attorney because it's a skill set that takes years to craft and get good at. And so Roberta and Mike, thank you very much for bringing those skills and that experience to the table. But I did learn a long time ago, one of the best ways to keep myself out of legal trouble is to do two things. Actually, I paid an attorney $20 to tell me this. When Francis Price, an attorney in Maryland, who's a good friend of mine, I said, dude, when I get ready to take this new job and travel all over the country, should I have an attorney? Because I'm going to be engaging in some really difficult conversations. He said, give me $20, Teddy. And I gave him $20. He goes, now I'm your attorney. You paid me a retainer. Let me give you two pieces of advice. Number one, ask real questions and listen to the answers. so that you are as clear as you can about the subject, the issue, the challenge, the problem, the interview, the job, process, et cetera, et cetera. Ask lots of questions so you're clear. And number two, shut your mouth when you need to shut your mouth. I paid $20 for that, and by golly, it's helped me a lot.
Get me out of jail, huh?
Mike?
More than $20, it would be my opinion. I would say to all of our listeners, and first of all, thank you all for doing this kind of open mic forum to tell people just general information. But if folks do have legal questions, they should know this is for really any area of the law. The North Carolina Bar Association, in which Roberta and I both have been active over the years, has a lawyer referral line, and you can call and get a 30-minute conference with an attorney in that area. If it's in Raleigh, North Carolina, and you need a lawyer on employment law, you can get a 30-minute conference for no more than $50. So it's not as your deal of $20, but so a knowledgeable lawyer, you can speak to them and they can tell you a lot in 30 minutes. So as you have questions that are kind of, what if kind of things, that'd probably be a pretty good place to start. And if you have other questions, then certainly you can go on to these governmental websites that Roberta has talked about. And then if you've got, certainly if you're doing a non-compete agreement, which are not that are sort of rare, I guess, certainly you should contact an attorney. But if you have any questions, call a lawyer and just make sure that you do what the law is before you kind of guess at what the law is. And ask questions, that's the main thing. Well, tell me about this, what about this, what about that? So that you know what you're getting into before you're there for a week or so and find out, holy cow, I didn't know it was going to be like this.
Cool.
Roberta, Mike, thanks. Next week's guest, Nancy Friedman. Nancy is the telephone doctor. So she knows all about tone of voice, listening skills, phone interviews, and she's going to talk about out-of-the-box job search techniques to include phone interviews, but also some other stuff. And you don't want to miss that. So that'll be next week. That is the first show in September, September 1st. We open up the mic at 11:55 for behind the scenes, 12 noon. Join Teddy, me, and Nancy Friedman. And you, if you have ideas for maybe future topics, maybe a guest that you'd like to hear, let us know. We're happy to work them in the schedule. So, Teddy, unless you've got other things, it's time for a late lunch today.
Roberta, Mike, thank you very much. We'll see everybody next week. Take care.
All right, bye now.
Thank you.